Okay, so picking right up where I left off, we just dealt with some of the coordinate systems. Now what I want to do is just, we've been using the ellipse for a little while, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Still going to use this background function. I'm going to use a new function here. And let's do something like mouse X and mouse Y. And this time what we'll do is just put those coordinates in there. Now, if you do have a little experience, you might be saying, well, Dane, why don't you just use like width divided by 2? We haven't really talked about that stuff yet, so I'm going to leave that. I'm trying to simplify as we go along. And I want to embed the idea of what are these numbers? What do these numbers actually mean, right? So we're using our mouse, and we're going to draw something from half of 800. In fact, let's make it a little easier here. Let's just make it the same number. Let's make our canvas 800 by 800. So this is going to be from 400, and half of the new width is going to be 800. Okay, look at this. I have a line that I have following my little pointer, right? U. And then it's fixed right here to the center of my sketch. Okay? So what I want to do is start messing with, and I always just kind of go in with this, like, hey, what would happen if this, it looks like this, or what other things can I do? So instead of putting this at the center with the mouse, the center of the screen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say mouse X and mouse Y, and I'm going to say mouse X and mouse Y again. But what I want to do is have the line still be at the same height, excuse me, as my cursor, but I want it to be out here to the side. So I'm just going to say plus, 150. Let's just do that. Right? Oh, so you can see it is pointing in the right direction. That's great. But I want this to be a drawing tool, right? I want to see this add up on the screen. So I don't want to continually erase as I go along, but I do want to have that color, that background. In fact, instead of 100, maybe I'll make this a little brighter, 150. Right? So now I have a drawing tool because I just have one piece of paper, a background, right, that I'm drawing into. Excuse me, I'd give my little sip of my my hot tea beverage here. All right, so let me reset. I can come back in here and try to draw my name. Boy, that's a thick pen though, so let's go back and change that. Instead of 150, let's just say 50. Dane. Boy, that's pretty bad cursive, but it's pretty good, right? I've written my name with my little drawing tool. That's just this line. At this point, you should not be like, wow, this is the coolest tool ever, right? This is just it's just a beginning. But sometimes that's the way it's supposed to work in code, is you're like, okay, can I draw this line? Let's just make sure the code's working. Okay, that's great, but it's boring. So how can I add some other stuff to it? So in the class, and this is not totally necessary to make this work, but I want you to get used to the idea that we can declare things like variables. So what's a variable? A variable is just a number, or I guess it could be especially in JavaScript, it can be anything. But it's the idea of assigning a label to something. And usually it's because you're going to use that multiple times. And instead of just typing in some complicated equation, right? Let's say I always wanted it to be, at those positions where those ellipses were in the previous tutorial. Instead of having to write up an equation that says this plus this divided by that, it's going to be this location, and I'm going to do that over and over, and I have to copy and paste that all the time. Maybe I can create a variable that has a simple name that's just called like x1. And I would do the equation and say, you know what, this fancy new thing called x1 is going to equal this bit of math. And then when I want to use it, I'll just always call it x1. So it just makes it easier. And that way, if you run around and change the equation, like if the equation's wrong, you only have to change it in one place, and then it will just go back to all the other places where you put this label called x1. So my little mini example of this, if I can figure out where my cursor is instead of having to type mouse X and mouse Y all the time, I want to just have something called X and Y, okay? And the first thing I need to do is let the program know, hey, I'm going to create this new thing, and I'm going to call it X. Now, if you look at other examples, and you will, previous tutorials and stuff, and you should be, you're going to see something like var. So var X equals, I'll just say 100 in this case. So I'm not going to use this. You know what? Let's pause this. So I'm not going to use var X right now at 100. Really what I want it to be is mouse X, right? Right, I could have it be mouse X plus 100 divided by 4, right, or by 3, right? Whatever, I could put some kind of equation in here. So you can see where this would simplify it if I just have one location where this is going to be. So I did put var in here, and this is kind of the old school JavaScript way of saying, hey, I'm going to have a variable. And you could use var for everything. So if you see that when you're looking online, don't be, and I'm using something different, don't be afraid. It's just the previous way of doing that. They've now added, kind of the convention is to use the term let. There's some fancy reasons for why we want to do that, but let's just not talk about those for now. So for now, if we're going to create a variable, I think of it in English. Let's let X equal mouse X. I always like the term let because it seems like it doesn't seem as definitive, which I like because if it's a variable, later on we can say, you know what, let's let X now equal 300, right? Whatever it is. Later on, I can tell X to be something else. I could tell it to be mouse X here, and then later on I could say, hey, X now equals 300 for whatever reason. Okay, that doesn't really help us in this setup, but so let's let X equal mouse X, and let's let Y equal mouse Y. So now I'll just put X and Y in there. And I'll put X and Y in there, right? Less code for me to write. The other thing too is if I decide, it's like maybe at the beginning what I'm doing is I'm going to draw a bunch of lines. There we go. So I'm going to draw a bunch of lines. I know I'm going to draw lines, but the position I might want to, where I want to put this might change. So right now, mouse X and mouse Y is a good way to just test maybe how the line in this little mark making tool is working. But I know later on, that's mouse X and mouse Y is just so I can see what's happening when I move around on the screen. Later on, I'm going to do some more complicated stuff. And in that place, if I had a whole bunch of lines using X and Y and ellipses and whatever shapes, all I need to do is just change these two little things without typing that into all these other arguments for the parameters in these. Okay, so that's okay, right? It makes a little line that's just straight here. I wanted to add a little variability to that. So maybe what I'll do is create a new one. So this time I'm going to create something called let R, and this is going to be a little new. So instead of just giving it a number or using a keyword like mouse X and Y, we're going to use a function, and we're going to use random. Okay. We're going to use random a lot at the very beginning. It's a great way to just get used to, at this point, giving over some of the control to the computer. Up previous to this, we've been saying, be at this location or be exactly where my mouse is. In this instance, what I want to do is say, you know what, computer, just use your fancy little mathematical ways. And when we position the length of this, basically that's what we're trying to do, right? We have the X and the Y. So this is starting out where the mouse is. And then what we're going to do is starting from that, we're going to put kind of the length of the line, if you want to think of it that way. It's really just the other X and Y coordinates that are going into that. So instead of 50, let's say R. So let's say, so the idea is here, be exactly where my mouse is, and then for the second point that you're going to draw a line to, point B, start exactly where my mouse is, and then go to the side in the X direction, a random amount of distance between 0 and 100. So that's what this means, right? Random between, it just assumes if there's one number, it means from 0 to 100. There we go. Right, so now you can see I have some variability in kind of this crosshatch that's going on. That's still, it's maybe a little hard to read. Maybe that's too much, I guess. I'm just continuing to write my name. It's kind of a pseudo cursive thing, right? All right, so let's go back, and then I want to change that. So it's pretty choppy as it runs along. So 100 maybe is too much, but I don't, and 0 maybe is too little. So what if I said, let's make random between 10 and 25. So there's just a little bit of variability. I've given up on writing kind of cursive, and I'm doing this kind of faux calligraphy. Look at that. I've now written my name. It looks fancy. My mom would be impressed. She loves doing calligraphy, and I did it on the computer. Now we're using these variables, and we can use these variables for a whole range of things. I could probably do a tutorial for an hour just using these and using these random variables to do all kinds of interesting and strange things. In fact, well, I'll just leave that for now. I can see I'm at 12 minutes in the tutorial. So I'm going to pause here. I'll save this one. I'm going to come back and try some slightly different approaches to making a drawing tool in the same kind of instance here. We'll look at how to change the fill, like what the color of this might be, the grayscale, the weight of the line, and we'll use random slightly differently to make a different kind of drawing mechanism. So I'll see you in a minute.